Lift every voice, the power of inclusion. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. African proverb. Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Leapart. Today, I want to talk to you about Black History Month, but not just as a time for reflection, but as a call to action. This month is about more than just celebrating the victories and the joys and the triumphs of African Americans. It is also about recognizing the power of community, allyship, and inclusion in our collective fight for justice. Our history is deeply rooted in the concept of togetherness. We have never fought alone. Our victories, whether in civil rights, education, law, or the arts, have always been achieved through resilience, unity, and the support of other allies. Before we go any further, I want to define allyship because it is central to today's conversation. Allyship is the practice of using one's privilege, voice, influence, and support to advocate for marginalized communities. True allyship is more than just words. It's action. It's standing up, speaking out, and sometimes taking a risk to support others. It's about listening, learning, and making space for the people whose voices have historically been silenced. Allies come in many forms: friends, colleagues, strangers, even leaders in positions of power. Some of history's greatest moments of progress happen not just because of oppressed fighting for themselves, but because of those who stood beside them. One of the earliest examples of allyship in the Black history is the story of the Underground Railroad and Follow the Drinking Gourd. The song was taught to the enslaved people, guiding them to freedom. An old man known as Peg-Leg Joe risked his life going from plantation to plantation, teaching the song to those seeking liberation. And when they followed his instructions, he was there waiting to help them cross to freedom. Another example of true allyship is Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson. Let me tell you about them. In 1947, Branch Rickey, a white baseball executive, took a stand against segregation by signing Jackie Robinson to the Brooklyn Dodgers, making him the first Black player in Major League Baseball. This was not a safe nor popular decision. Rickey did not just give Robinson a chance. He stood beside him through racism, threats, and backlash. He made sure Robinson had protection, support, and the opportunity to prove his greatness. Allyship means taking risks, even when it's not convenient. It means using influence to break barriers, just as Branch Rickey did for Jackie Robinson and so many others who followed. But allyship isn't just about the past, it's happening today, and we need it in every industry. In government, we have seen white allies use their platforms to advance civil rights, such as Lyndon B. Johnson, who signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Robert F. Kennedy, who advocated for social justice alongside Dr. King, and more recently, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who has been vocal in her support for racial equity policies. In the arts, we have white allies like Harry Belafonte's close friend, Marlon Brando, who used his fame to support Black artists and civil rights movement. Today, Brene Brown, a social researcher and author, amplifies conversations around race, privilege, and vulnerability, encouraging people to actively challenge bias. What all these examples show is that allyship is a continuous effort. It requires action, advocacy, and the willingness to stand with those whose voices are often unheard. Allyship is not always easy. Sometimes it requires great courage and even personal sacrifice. One such example is Viola Liuzzo, a white woman from Detroit, Michigan, who left her home and family to join the civil rights movement. She was deeply moved by Dr. King's call for support after Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, and decided to travel to the South for help. Louiso played a critical role by driving Black activists and volunteers back and forth from Selma to Montgomery, ensuring their safety. Tragically, on one of these trips, she was murdered by the KKK. Her story is a reminder that real allyship requires action and sometimes sacrifice. Most of us will never be called to risk our lives like Viola did, but we will be called to act, to speak up when something is wrong, to stand beside someone when they are being ignored, to use our influence to open doors for others. The question is, will we answer that call? Brene Brown puts it best. We don't have to do it all alone. We were never meant to. Justice is not a Black issue. It's a human issue. When we fight for Black equality, we fight for women, children, immigrants, people with disabilities, LGBTQ communities, and all marginalized groups. The moment one person's rights are taken away, we are all at risk. Allyship means recognizing injustice before it's too late. Sandra Bland was a 28-year-old Black woman, educated, professional, and outspoken about racial justice. She frequently spoke on social media about racism, police violence, urging others to pay attention, speak up, and take action. But in 2015, Sandra was pulled over in Texas for a minor traffic violation, which should have been a routine stop, escalated quickly, with the officer using excessive force, ultimately leading to arrest. 3 days later, she was found dead in her jail cell. Her death sparked national outrage because it reflected a pattern of how Black women's lives are often devalued. Sandra's story reminds us that no one is exempt from injustice and that allyship must extend beyond just words. It must be action. If someone had stepped in, if there had been more voices demanding justice in that moment, maybe she would still be here. We cannot wait until tragedy strikes to care. We must care now. Despite systematic barriers, Black excellence continues to thrive across industries. Booker T. Washington once said, "Success is measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which we have overcome while trying to succeed." In law, we have Thurgood Marshall, who became the first Black Supreme Court Justice, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first Black woman to serve on the Supreme Court and a member of my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. In government, we have Barack Obama, the first Black president, and Kamala Harris, the first Black woman vice president, also a member of the illustrious Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. In the arts, we have legends like Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, and Beyonce, whose works reflect the power and the depth of Black storytelling. None of these figures rose to success alone. They were supported by mentors, allies, and communities who believed in their potential. Sometimes allyship isn't about making history. It's about seeing someone and standing up for them in everyday life. I remember I was attending a networking event put on by a local business. I was having a conversation with a group of women when another woman of a different race walked up to me and gave me a compliment on my hair. She then proceeded to run her fingers through my hair and play with it. I turned around, stunned, but I didn't say anything. She smiled and walked away. The people around me looked just as shocked as I felt. But before I had time to process it, someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was a member of the organization that had put on the event, and she happened to be the same race as the woman who had just walked away. She leaned in and whispered, "I am so sorry that that just happened to you. That woman had no right to touch your hair. Are you okay?" I told her I was fine, but I thanked her, because at that moment it mattered. It wasn't life or death. It was an extreme form of racism, but it was a moment where I felt seen, where someone cared enough to acknowledge what had happened and affirm that it wasn't okay. That's allyship. Audre Lorde reminds us, I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own. Marginalized communities are often left unseen and unheard. The next time you walk into a room, look around. Who's missing? Whose voice is not being heard? Will you be the person to notice, to speak up, to take action? We each have the ability and the responsibility to stand in the gap for someone else. So I leave you with this question. How will you use your voice, your presence, your influence to lift every voice and build a more inclusive future? Thank you.